G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today, we are talking with bass player and founding member of the Atlantics, Bosco Bosanac. The Atlantics were formed in 1961 in Sydney and are best known for their 1963 surf hit, Bombora. The song would go to number one in Australia and chart highly all over the world, making the Atlantics Australia's first internationally recognised rock group. 60 years on, the group is still going, having just released their latest studio album, Still Making Waves, in 2023. Bosco made the time to talk to me via phone about his time in the band and the more recent music work by the group. G'day Bosco, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Thank you very much. G'day there, Jack. Nice to speak to you today.
Let's start off at the beginning, Bosco. You were born around the early 1940s around the Sydney area. Do you remember much of your childhood?
I actually wasn't born in the Sydney area. I was a little migrant kid. I was born over in Egypt during the Second World War, 1943, and my parents were both from other countries. They weren't Egyptian. They were. My dad was on a British destroyer chasing German Stuka bombers and submarines around the African front back then in 1943, and he was Yugoslav, but he was on a British destroyer. He was an officer on that. And Mum was living in Egypt like a lot of Greek people were at that time. They got out of Greece during that Second World War period, and she was there with her sisters, and Dad met her, got married, had me, and so I was born an Egyptian from Alexandria, I suppose, but I'm not really an Egyptian. I'm half Yugo, half Greek background, and they brought me out to Australia in 1948 as migrants. We landed in Australia in 1948. Yeah.
Do you remember much about like your early years in Australia?
Oh, yeah. That was a great time to grow up. The late 40s into the 50s. It was all brand new country, and Mum and Dad got work, and they ended up buying themselves a house down, a few years in, settled down and just started their lives completely from scratch again, Dad never went back to his home country, and neither did Mum. Right?
Yeah. Was it a musical kind of family, would you say?
Oh, no, it wasn't musical until about, around about high school time. Yeah, I remember the only thing I did when I was in primary was playing a recorder band or something, with the flute type things. And then I met Jim and Peter and Theo during our high school days. And then we decided, to start doing what they call now garage banding, practicing in someone's place. And that was Eddy Matzenik as well, who was the original guy that got us all going into all that sort of stuff. He had a flat with his mother, and we used to practice. I don't know how we must have driven the neighbours nuts, but we used to play in this little tiny flat in Randwick, and we used to garage band away in the actual unit itself.
Like, what were some of the songs that you were kind of playing in that garage band at the time?
Oh, well, all sorts of stuff. Theo and Ed Matzenik liked Chet Atkins type style of guitar playing, and there was a few hits around by Chet Atkins around that time, finger style, sort of finger picking guitar playing, but we were solidly into the Shadows. We used to learn every single Shadows song that ever came out. We played it, So we based ourselves really on the Ventures and the Shadows, but mostly on the Shadows.
Is that when you kind of started playing bass, like when in the garage band kind of thing?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, so we eventually nagged our parents into helping us get instruments and stuff, and flying on bare bones with hardly any equipment right at the beginning. But there was a gentleman out in the eastern suburbs we used to call him Mr. Melnik. A Hungarian gentleman that used to fix guitars and he actually used to make guitars. He made a few custom guitars for us. And I think both Eddy Matzenik, Theo and myself, we all had instruments made by him. I had a bass made by him, and Theo had a cutaway sort of jazz style looking guitar, like a Gibson-y looking Gretsch. And Ed Matzenik got a solid body made that looked a bit like that Cold Joy guitar that Cold Joy had made way back in those days.
So you're in the garage band, and when did that kind of form into the Atlantics? Like, what was when did that kind of name pop up?
Well, we started wandering around at that period when we were garage banding and trying to think up a name. And I remember we were walking past service station, which is no longer around, called Atlantic Petrol. Remember those? Atlantic service stations. We got our name from a service station, not from the Atlantic Ocean.
Did you have any names like before that you were kind of going through, or was that like the first official name for the group?
No, I think that as far as I can remember, we just got a name going pretty quick once we started rehearsing.
Yeah, okay.
And, we settled on it pretty fast.
Were there many places for young people to play back then, like live kind of thing?
Not really. It took a while before we started actually playing in venues, but I remember I've got some photos of us at our very first gig, which was it was in a building in the city, and it was like put on by music teachers, by especially one guitarist that was teaching Theo guitar. Oh, there was two guys teaching guitar. Roy Royston was one of them, and the other bloke was I'm trying to think of the other bloke's name. It's just not on the tip of my tongue. But they had a lot of pupils, so they used to put like an annual concert on. So they had us on doing a couple of numbers on this pupils concert type thing at the end of the year, and that was our very first gig of it. And I've got photos of that. You'll probably see some of that photo in some of our old memorabilia, some of the old Atlantic publications.
Yeah. How much did you guys get for gigs back then? Like around, like was it a well-paying kind of thing once you kind of got started, kind of thing?
I barely remember. It wasn't anything terrific, No, it was sort of peanut money, So as musicians' fees have always been over the years, So. We were just happy to play somewhere, and we got paid whatever we got paid. I don't know, we got $20 or something, each for a gig or something like
that. Yeah. What was the point that you kind of all started kind of writing?
We just all fell into it, and everybody wanted to branch off and do something original. And one of the main powerhouses for pushing us along to do that was Peter Hood, the drummer. Peter was very ambitious, and he used to practice like 20 hours out of 24 hours a day. He's that dynamic, smashing drum sound that he had, And so he started writing stuff with Jim, and I started writing stuff. Theo wrote some, so we all contributed to the originals. And I remember we had a kind of one of our friends was what would you call him, like an electronics nerd, and so he had this old Philips mono tape recorder, I think it was, one of those old Bakelite plastic things, and he used to make stuff for us. He used to make like what we call fuzz boxes or distortion boxes.
Yeah.
And we bought a couple of those old Echo units called Echo Lets, German made, and Peter was really fanatic about those, and he used to always experiment with all the different settings, including, I remember when we recorded War of the Worlds, that was our fourth, fifth single or so, we used two of those running into one running into the other, so you sort of got an endless loop of this incredible sort of echo sound that just went on forever, so we were all experimenting with sounds and, like running stuff over the strings of the guitars, like metal objects, bottles, you name it, we tried everything, So I suppose you could say we were pretty experimental, for that era when most people were just playing straight music.
Yeah. I've read too that you guys got to appear on a local TV show called New Faces in 1962. I mean, how did you, like being a young group, how did you get to be on TV at that time?
Well, we were fortunate. We ran into a lady that became our manager, our first manager. Her name was Joan King, and I think she was the auntie of. We also had a piano player for a while when we first started. She was the piano player's auntie, and his name was Eddy Staines. And she did a really darn good job, She started giving us places to play, and she took these tapes that this guy was recording, doing recordings of us. Bill Demos was the name of the guy that was the electronics man. And I remember Festival saying something like, "Oh, you come back another time, come back next year." Well, so she got knockbacks everywhere, and then finally she cracked it with Sven Liebeck, who just lobbed into CBS Records as the A&R man for CBS. He'd just got to Australia from, I think he was from Sweden or Norway, and we ended up getting a contract with CBS, and the rest is all history, you know.
And I mean, do you recall much about that audition for CBS Records? Because I listened to an interview with Peter that was from some years ago, and he said you guys got in there, and 2 minutes in, you're playing your songs, and Liebig, I think it was that, and he was absolutely 2 minutes in, and he absolutely loves the music of the Atlantics, and pretty much says he's going to sign you. I mean, do you recall much about that audition?
No, not really. I've got a photo of us sitting in CBS Records on a couple of chairs and that with our amp and our guitars, and I don't know whether we staged it or whether we really did go in and audition because he heard the tapes. Maybe he wanted to hear us live, and I can't recall that. Probably the other guy, the rest of the guys might remember whether we actually played to him. I know we went into his office, and Joan was there. She's in the photo, and we're sitting in the CBS office with our guitars and a Fender amplifier set up, and it may have been just a stage photo. I'm not sure, you know.
After getting signed to CBS, I think the first single came out in February '63 for the band, A-side Moon Man, B-side Dark Eyes. Do you remember much about recording, like, for the first time for CBS, you know, recording Moon Man?
Yeah. I think we recorded in that really big main studio in EMI in Castle Ray Street in the city, in Sydney. And it was a gigantic studio made for orchestras and stuff, you know, and it was actually hard recording in those places. You had to try and put some separation booths around the amps because the sound just disappeared up into the air, you know, like straight up to the ceiling. It wasn't the best of acoustics for a rock band, you know, a band like ours that were up at that time. So and the doing the recordings and involved in it were only all learning how to do recordings for groups like us, guys that are coming up with electric guitars all of a sudden, amplifiers and things, you know. Yeah. So everybody was learning the ropes of recording, and we were learning all the tricks that we knew to place our guitars and amps and microphones. We placed our mics around the way we wanted them most of the time, you know. There wasn't a great deal of knowledge. It was all the previous kind of people doing recordings were all doing big bands and you know, double basses and you know, brass instruments and stuff like that. You know, suddenly there's all bands coming out playing rock and roll with electric guitars and amps.
And when did like the surfing kind of craze hit Australian shores? Like, was that like around the time the single came out? Like, yeah, what do you remember of that?
Oh no, we put out Moon Man. What was on the other side? Dark Eyes, I think. Moon Man was did a bit of charting and went up halfway up the charts and got everybody interested. And I think about Moon Man came out in the early part of '63, and at the end of '63 we released Bombora, and boom, that just took off. I remember I kept all the charts, Sydney charts, and it was up on number one spot for eight weeks running, right when the Beatles and all those other big hits that were going, international hits were around, and it seemed to keep me up. For 8 weeks we were at number one on the TGB, TV, and TW sound charts.
How did that song come to be? Like, was it just like, did it just come out of nowhere? Like, yeah. What was the writing process?
Oh, I don't know whether you've ever interviewed Jim and Peter about that, but they were going to go out one day, and it was raining. It wasn't much of a day. I think they were going to go to the Royal Easter Show or something, and then they had to lob it out because of the rainy day. And they stayed home and knocked off Bombora in about 10 or minutes or half an hour. So it didn't take them long. Peter had one part of a song and Jim had another part of another song, and they put it together, and there you are, voila, you got Bombora.
Do you remember hearing it like for the first time? Like, did they ever show it to you, like before you guys recorded it? Yeah.
They would have brought it to rehearsal straight away. We would have got stuck into arranging it and recording it. You know? Yeah. So there you go. I think the choice of putting that out might have been Sven Liebig's, I'm not sure, you know, but we did do a whole album worth of songs, so he would have selected that as a single, I suppose. And
of course, we're talking back in the '60s, early '60s. We're talking pretty much mono tape, right? Like, because you guys would have played most of those songs like live in the studio with little like overdubs, right?
Yeah. Well, we didn't actually even do overdubs on our first couple of albums. It was all live, you know. one bang, there was no multi-track. There was mono, and then maybe stereo came in, and then they came in with 4 tracks in the later years, but and then eight tracks and 16. But well, we had to just do it all properly, all together, or else or nothing, So.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing because there's so many, like when you listen to a lot of that Atlantics, like a lot of the early songs you guys did, there's a lot of sounds like going on on those records, and there's like so much going on, and to say that like that's mono, like one track kind of live, I think it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it is, and considering that they hardly had any mics on the drums, I think you'd be lucky if they just had one overhead mic when we did that first album on the drums. I don't know if they even mic'd the kick drum because, to my recollection, I don't recall hearing a real lot of kick drum on the original Bombora. It's pretty well absent, I think. And as you can see when you play our later recording that we did when we reformed in 2000, we re-recorded Bombora and a lot of our tracks and did our own best of our old songs. Of course, the sound was fabulous. The drum recording especially, with the multiple microphones all around the drum kit. And today's technology, it's got some oomph, the newer version, much clearer. But then again, the original mono version still cuts it, doesn't it? Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen a photo of Peter in the studio, and I remember it just had one mic over the top of his drums.
Yeah.
Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't think they mic'd the snare and the kick drum or anything else. They just stuck one big mic over the top.
Do you remember hearing like that song on the radio for the first time, or do you remember hearing yourself on the radio for the first time? Whatever.
Yeah. I remember hearing it down at the beach and everywhere on the transistor radios that we had. It would come on while we're down surfing down at the beach, and on different radio stations and that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big thrill for young guys in their 17, 18, 19 years of age, whatever we were.
Oh, I can imagine, and I bet it would have been a big thrill for you guys when you heard you went to number one.
Yeah, we were stoked. Things have just happened to me in my life like that, and they just come along. They happen. You kind of Forrest Gump it, I suppose. Things will just happen. I love that movie Forrest Gump because that's the story of my life.
Yeah.
Everything I've done in my life has just happened to happen, Nobody, I don't think anybody really can plan their life to perfection and it comes out exactly how your plan of what you wanted your life to be. It's all just a matter of just one thing falling into place after another through your life.
I was doing some reading too, because you mentioned you did the albums as well. I think there's 63, you had 2 albums come out in 63 alone. I think they were called Now It's Stomping Time and Bombora. You guys must have been in the studio a lot just during 1963, because 2 albums in 1 year, that's quite a bit of work.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lot of time because they used to do 3-hour sessions and we used to knock off nearly a whole album in 3 hours. It wasn't like we were sitting there like the Beatles and that, spending 2 weeks to do one track, we didn't have that luxury, produce or perish,
And look, I was looking at the track listings and, when you guys picked songs to be singles, so you recorded the albums first and then picked the singles or how did that kind of go?
Mainly it was up to A&R guy, Sven Liebeck, I think, picked out what the singles were,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure most of it, I don't know whether we were consulted much, I can't remember. Maybe I wasn't at the meetings, so they might have had meetings. But it was sort of fairly obvious, but I think the boss was the producer, Sven Liebeck, when it came to which single, is going out next.
It seems like a lot of people think of the Atlantics as just being an instrumental group, but whereas I've heard that you guys also, when you were playing live back then, you didn't just play instrumentals, you also played songs from the Beatles, the Stones. Is that am I right on that?
Yeah, we had to do all the top 40 stuff. We were into the Animals, Who, Them. They were the ones we really went for, the real heavy, Eric Burdon and the Animals and all that stuff. And we virtually knew every Beatles song from the first couple of albums, and we had to start singing and doing vocals and whatever was on top of the charts, we had to learn it to play at dances, That's what people wanted to hear when they came to a teenage dance type of thing, whatever you call it.
Yeah, what were those dances like back in the 60s?
Yeah, I remember Pretty Good Boys packed, a million people, and usually in town halls and sort of, there wasn't many clubs started at that time. So it was mainly in halls, that we used to hire out, and promoters used to hire halls and big theatres,
Yeah, did you guys ever play Newcastle, Australia back in the 60s? That's because that's where the station's based. I'm just wondering if you had any memories of playing Newcastle.
In Newcastle, I suppose we did, Yeah, I guess so. I've got some real vague memory of being in the Atlantics and playing in a place in Newcastle, but that's about all. I can't remember what it was. Might have been one of their really big dances, because I remember it was a big stage, a million people there, and for some reason Newcastle seems to cross my mind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, maybe
because we used to travel around a lot. Once we got going in end of 63, going to 64, we changed management. We went over to Sid McDonough, became our manager, who was Johnny Reb's manager from the 50s era. And he teamed us up with John to be our vocalist from there on, from the 1964 onwards.
Yep.
So he was a business type guy, and he used to organise tours all through the New South Wales country and down to Victoria and stuff. And and we used to play actual dance halls all around the country towns.
Yeah,
on big long tours and things.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier the band's fourth single, War of the Worlds, and you kind of mentioned a bit about the recording of that song. And I mean, that's an amazing, like, it's definitely different to the surf sound. It's kind of more, I've heard it described as like a mini sci-fi, like space opera kind of sound to it. I mean, what inspired that record? Because I mean, it's a great record.
Oh, I don't know. We were all into sci-fi sort of stuff, and especially I think Peter was into that kind of thing, and he was more responsible for sitting there with the two echo lets, drumming up this dirty big long echo setting that we used for it, and it was just to sort of break away and try something different. And I think virtually it was starting to be the forerunner of what came later with all the heavier bands have started to come out with similar kind of ideas, with that spaced out guitar sound, and like the Deep Purples and all the stuff that started happening in the 70s. I remember there was I probably got it somewhere, a clipping of it in one of my albums. I haven't seen it for years, but I remember John Laws was doing his radio program, but he also had a magazine article that he used to do in one of the big papers every week, a review on the releases of music releases. And I remember him giving it a really great rap, something like what you just said, something about this is like, wow, what is this? This thing that the Atlantis just put in. It's like a Baroque, a classical piece or something, he really gave it a good wrap up, and it didn't help it go to number one though. The radio stations kind of never played it, so that's why it never got anywhere, I suppose.
Yeah.
From that period onwards, from about our second, third, fourth singles, they were getting put aside by the radio stations. The radio stations all were starting to bring in their what do they call it? Their rule of just playing overseas things that were hits overseas, and the Aussie releases were getting harder and harder to get airplay for.
Yeah.
So if they ignored them, they weren't going to be a hit, were they? Nobody wanted to play War of the World, I think.
People didn't really start experimenting with sound like the Atlantics did in 64 until like around 66, 67. So you guys were ahead of your time. I mean, do you think if you continued going in that direction, you guys could have kept kind of making those experimental sounds and have done something completely new?
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, we set up our own record label. We ended up splitting with CBS and bringing out our own independent label, Ramrod Records, and we recorded a lot of vocals that were pretty right into it. Like they were really hard-hitting stuff that apparently today, the stuff we did with Johnny Reb and the vocals were really hard-hitting, punky sort of stuff. And so people collect that stuff now. They describe us, once we got into that vocal thing and the independent label, describe us as being what do they call us? An Aussie psychedelic punk rock garage band or something like that. So we were on the right track with the vocals, because obviously it struck a lot of chords later on, in time, in hindsight. But at the time, we had exactly the same problem that Sid used to take the new releases into the radio stations and no reaction,
Yeah.
Unless you had a lot of money, and I'm afraid to say there was payola stuff going on where if you paid for your time on the air, you would have got played, but and who knows whether people would have, the general public may not have liked what we were doing, garage punk stuff, but then again, it was very similar. We were doing similar stuff to what the Animals and the Who and all those guys were doing at the same time, at the same era.
Oh, no.
So maybe with a bit of airplay, it might have cracked it in Australia,
And I've spoken to a few people about how, like, the British invasion from the American sense, when the Beatles came out, American people couldn't get airplay. But in Australia, was that the same? Like, was there, like, when the Beatles... Yeah.
Well, that wiped us out. But I can't believe that the Bombora sat at number one for, whatever it was, 8 weeks in Sydney. On all the charts, right with all the British invasion all around,
Yeah.
We just somehow survived that, only that one time, And I think Crusher got up to about number 2 or so, almost number one final thereabouts.
Yeah, no, that record also did very well. No, definitely. And towards the later 60s, 67 kind of thing, you started doing that kind of punk, kind of psychedelic sound. And I think one of probably the best representation of that sound is your song "Come On." I think it was written written by Peter Hood. I mean, how did that kind of song come to be? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we were all starting to get into writing vocals and singing, and there's a lot of tracks where we all shared vocals, and I did some lead vocals on some of our albums, some of our singles, not albums. We actually never got to make an album and Ramrod Records. It was always singles, Yeah, and I think most people can't get their hands on those old vocal original singles because they're worth a lot of money, Apparently, Come On, yeah. I had a spare copy of Come On. I sold it a couple of years back. And single of Come On netted me $1,500.
Yeah, right.
And, so I mean, but it was a really good copy, not mint condition, But that's a lot of money to pay for a single.
Yeah. Do you find yourself ever like pulling out the old vinyls, like of your stuff with the Atlantics, like, and listening to them, like, yeah?
No, not really. Just move on to different things. I've been flat out with other projects. I'll probably start writing some songs again and doing some vocal stuff in the country field,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did have a really good Johnny Cash show going, and I'll just revive it again soon. Called Cash on Delivery,
Yeah, I mean, how did you start with the Cash on Delivery tribute to Johnny Cash? How did that all start?
That was my little wifey, Jackie. She said, she saw the picture of Johnny Cash on the front of Time magazine and said, "Gee, you look like Johnny Cash." I said, "Oh, do I?" I wonder if I could sing. Like, if I went down the road and bought a greatest hits of Johnny Cash and found out I got a bass baritone voice. I never used it up until then. So found out I could sing like him, like falling off a log. And then I said, okay, well, if you discovered me as Johnny Cash, I'm going to discover you. You can be June Carter,
Yeah.
So I used to just get her up to do a couple of songs with me, a couple of duets through the show to brighten up the show.
Yeah.
And, so we had fun travelling all over the world, Norway, America, England, Spain, all over the joint,
Yeah.
and all around the theatres and casinos around Australia.
You had a vinyl record store back in the day. I think it was called Vintage Record Bar. I mean, could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, the Vintage Record Cafe, and it's still there. I sold it in mid-2000, and there's still a young fella running it. I just can't think of his name. I haven't popped in there for a while. But, it's still going on Parramatta Road in Annandale there. And I did, how many years there? I don't know. Yeah, I was only there about a year or so. And I sold it when we reformed the Atlantics in 2000. It was going to be too much trouble running it and doing all that. So I got out of that business and did the Atlantic stuff. And then straight after the Atlantics, into the Johnny Cash tribute show, So, yeah, I had about 12 months with the record thing, but I was still doing record fairs before that, and after it, I still had a lot of vinyl laying around everywhere. And as I said, the guy that bought that shop off me is still there today. So anybody wants some vinyl, go in, I forget the number, 33 Parramatta Road, Annandale. And I think he just calls it the vintage record now, And I actually made it a cafe. Yeah, there was a cafe equipment in there. So I ended up at the beginning calling it the Vintage Record Cafe. And he had a coffee and buy some vinyl, and then closed that down and just kept it as a record and guitar shop for a while,
Yeah, are you still into the vinyl today? Like, do you buy records still, or are you more?
Oh no! I think I just got rid of most. I just turfed a lot of it only just recently. I had a lot of vinyl at home and got some dealers around and sold a lot. I've just kept some monumental things that mean something to me. Some of the first Shadows album. I've got about 5 different copies of an English pressing, Australian, mono, stereo. Because that album of the Shadows, the first one they put out, we used to play that to death and play every song on it. And we were wrapped in the instrument. They had their instruments, and they had these mohair kind of jumpers on. And we used to go, wow, look at these great jumpers. Jet Harris, I think, had a stripe one. And our lovely manager lady, Joan, she knitted us similar jumpers. How's that, eh?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, she made us all a mohair jumper, knitted us a mohair jumper so we could look like the Shadows. How's that?
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. No, that's great. Is there any modern artists or groups that you're listening to at the moment, or is modern music not your thing, or
No, I'm not into what's on the charts anymore, for the last few years, but I sort of keep half an ear on it, and still follow the country music thing to some extent. But I've just been flashing back on YouTube and looking at all the stuff that I grew up with, the Everly brothers, all the guitar whizzes like, Chet Atkins and, all those old session guitarists and musos. You can see all these terrific clips now on YouTube, going right back, black and white stuff, from the 50s and 60s. I'm busy just watching and listening to that stuff now, It's just reminiscing, going back to the past, But I've got heaps and heaps of CDs of Guitar Whiz people. I've got hundreds and hundreds of them because I was about to do a radio program about 20 years back, and I was down at the local 2SSER, I think. I forget the name of the station, the one around Sutherland area. And I was doing my course, and I was just about to get my certificate to be a radio presenter, and I was going to put on a Guitar Whiz show, call it something like Stars on Guitars or something, and there would have been guitarists plus guitarist singers, anybody that played a guitar or sang or did instrumentals. I've got Shadows, I've got Venture stuff, I've got, all the Dire Straits albums, all the acoustic stuff, Brazilian music, whatever. And so I've got this dirty big stash of it here in my garage now, and I haven't played them for years. Probably haven't even played them at all, but the program went down the tube because my Johnny Cash show took off so well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just had to just go for that. I couldn't handle being a radio announcer as well and trying to cook up programs every week. It would have been a lot of work just programming just to do a one show a week. So that was the end of my career. Never started as a radio announcer.
and look, just before we go, I just wanted to ask too. Have you heard the Atlantic's latest album, Still Making Waves, yet?
Oh yeah, my word, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, what did you reckon of it?
Oh yeah, well I play bass on it,
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So you were part. I wasn't sure if you were a part. Okay. Yeah. Right.
No, I was part of it. Yeah, I was part of it all. So yeah, I know all about it. And I've been handing out copies to different people that were promoting from it, trying to help promote it a bit. But so no, it's strange, isn't it? 60 years later, we've put out another album. Yeah.
Well, Bosco, I want to thank you so much for making the time to talk to me today. I think it's been a great interview.
And thank you very much, Jack, for considering interviewing one of us out of the band to give us a bit of a promotion for the CD. But we'll see what happens. I don't know whether people really want to hear 60s style instrumentals again. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I think there's been a lot of interest in podcasts and different international radio stations around. The rest of the boys, Martin, Celia and Jim, have been doing a lot of interviews for overseas broadcasts of different kinds, So, there is still somebody out there that's interested in that genre. So, we'll see how it all heads, as we go.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for considering us for another interview. I'd like to wish you all the best, and anybody that listens to this program, all the best to you all. God bless you all. Take care, and we might see you somewhere on a tour or something. You never know. I don't think we're probably ever going to do a live tour, but we'll see. You never know, do you?
That was original bass player and founding member of the Atlantics, Bosco Bosanac. The Atlantics are still making music, having just released their latest album, Still Making Waves. To check out the album and to learn more about the band's history, you can head to their website at theatlantics.com. Remember to share this episode with other music fans, and if you really enjoyed this edition, let us know. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes, and to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.